Have you ever wanted to take a secondary hard drive and just kind of combine it onto your existing system? Well, you're in luck if you're using Linux, specifically a Linux operating system with LVM on it. What is LVM? It's logical volume management, and it has some really cool features, and it's not widely used in the Linux community, and honestly, it's not really widely used out in the world, but it's something I wanted to explain because it can be extremely powerful, and that's what we're going to cover. I'm going to cover creating it, all the ins and outs, the different layers of it, so you have a really good understanding of LVM. And we're going to take this hard drive, put it into this machine back here, and expand our solid state storage from 256 to 512 gigabytes. And that's not just adding a folder or some, hacky way of doing it. This physically increases the volume that we actually store all our media on the machine. So that's what we're going to do today. All right, so I'm going to put something up on the screen. Now, this is a diagram, and it kind of explains the layers of LVM. Now, before I jump in to explain LVM, let's first go over the traditional format and layout of a regular old machine. You first have your hard drives, and your hard drives are basically physical hard drives like this. This would be hard drive. And that would be labeled usually dev SDA, let's say, is our first drive. And then we have our partitions. That's basically carving this guy up, and you put little partitions on it. You got a boot partition in some instances, and sometimes you only have one partition that takes up the whole drive. And then past that, you go into your partition and you put your file system on it. So that would be a traditional system. That's most Linux systems. That's actually almost every single Windows system works this method. So that's your three basic layers of storage on your system. Now, LVM, as you see, has a lot of more layers added to it. So that's what we're going to go over. So the basic oversimplified version of it, because I really like to just oversimplify so you get a good understanding of it. And if you really want to dive deeper, you can always use -- help or manual or man space, whatever command you're trying to learn out of here to really learn more and more about these things. First off, you have your physical volume. So physical volume would be the first layer of LVM, and that's basically saying, hey, this partition goes into this volume. Now, next up, we have the volume groups. Now, physical volumes, let's say this one hard drive has 3 different partitions on it, and that was all put into PVs or physical volumes. And you wanted to take all 3 of those and make one volume group. You totally can do that. That's like the second layer. So after you've made your physical volumes, you put them into a volume group. And then lastly, on the final layer, you have your logical volumes, hence LVM. And this basically takes that volume group and says, hey, I want to make a file system out of it. So think of the volume group almost like the partition is to a traditional environment. This is where you'd carve it up and either make one giant volume or maybe a couple or 3 or 4 different ones depending on the size of this volume group. So this is LVM in a nutshell, and it can get very confusing because, as you see, it's like the inception of hard drive storage. However, it's very powerful. As you see, we can take 5 hard drives, combining them up into a single volume group, and then we can take those 5 hard drives and make 2 partitions or one giant partition if we wanted, or one giant logical volume out of that volume group. Whatever it might be, you're just got so many options. But in today's video, I'm going to take the root partition of my Fedora instance, and it currently has, I think, 200 gigs free, and I'm going to go ahead and add another 250 gigs. I'm going to take this whole hard disk, partition it into one giant partition, and then I'm going to take that partition, make a physical volume, add that to the existing volume group, and then we're going to expand the current logical volume of our home directory and expand that to have another 250 gigs in this guy. Now, that 250 gigs is just going to use whenever I put more data on it, and it'll autofill this drive once the other drive is full. So it's really, really powerful stuff, but it can get really confusing really fast. So we're going to go through all the major commands of LVM today. And with that, let's jump on the desktop and get into this. Okay, to start out with, we're going to go over to christitus.com. I made a kind of a cheat sheet because I can't remember all the commands for LVM, but I went ahead and made this guide so you can come down in here. It kind of explains the overview we just covered, and then it goes right into the commands of all the different layers of LVM. And I kind of broke them into 3 different layers just because, well, it's going to help us out a lot, because you want to first get your PV set up, and then you do your volume group, and then finally you do the logical volume. So that's like the 3 steps. I call them layers here, but that's basically what I'm doing by breaking it apart. So we'll start out with an LVM disk scan. So we'll pull up our terminal, sudo LVM disk scan. And this kind of tells us what all we have. Right here, we have a logical disk volume on SD3. These are actually not. This is a UEFI installation, so this is actually reserved for specifically that. SDB and SDA does not have any kind of LVM set up either. So that now that we see these things, we only have 3 partitions really, or really 3 partitions that aren't used for an LVM, and that's SDA1, SDC1, and SDC2. These are all about a gig for these 2, which I've already said that's mainly for UEFI. And this one, the SDA1, is my games disk. I specifically put everything on there. That way, when I go from one install to the next, I can just attach it back right into my home folder. So I actually did that. You can see it right here, the 2 terabyte drive. It has like my games and Steam library and some VMs and other things that I use on pretty much all my installs. So this SDB is the first drive we actually explained and showed you at the very beginning. There isn't anything on SDB, but let's do an fdisk ldev SDB. Having problems with sudo today. All right, so SDB, we have this one drive. There's no partitions or anything on it. So let's go ahead and fix that first. We need to partition our disk because if we look in here, you see how you have the hard drive and then you have a partition? There is no partition on this disk, so we need to do that. Now, I highly recommend if you're doing LVMs, stick to ext4. ext4 is has a lot more capabilities. If you use BetterFS or ZFS, you can't dynamically change your LVM, like expand it and contract it, and it really takes away a lot of the awesomeness of LVM. So I only recommend ext4 for this. So we're going to go to SDB. You'll see it's all unallocated. We're going to go ahead and create a full-fledged ext4 primary thing, and we're going to call this one home. So we'll go ahead, hit apply, and we'll go ahead and close this out. Now that we should see this in our scans, so we'll do another LVM disk scan, and now you'll see that it says SDB1, which is exactly what we want. Now, if we do a PV scan, it'll kind of show, you know what, since I'm working with the disk, I'm going to just switch to super user because you're going to need to do sudo for every single one of these commands. So we're just going to switch directly over to the root user. So PV scan, and you'll see only one LVM or PV is present. We're going to go ahead and create another one because if you look at our chart, we first create the physical volume, which we need to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at our commands. We can do a PV create in here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And I don't think I don't see a PV create command, but I'm pretty sure that's the command. Maybe I just forgot to put it in my guide. I'll append it after this video. So we'll do a PV create, and we'll just do dev SDB1. And we'll wipe it. Now, if you have existing data, make very sure you get the right drive here. If I would do SDA1 instead of SDB1, I would literally wipe out all my games and everything I have. So very important. Don't do this on a drive you have data on, because it will wipe it clean. All right, so we've created the physical volume on SDB1. With that done, we can proceed to the volume group. So let's go and take a look at that. We'll go to layer 2. Now we're dealing with the volume groups, which if you look in the hierarchy of things, we're now on the green volume groups. And we need to add this physical volume to the volume group. So let's do a VG scan and see what we're dealing with. You see we have one volume group, Fedora _ localhost -live. This was created by the actual operating system when I installed it. So we're going to add this new drive, or this new physical volume, to the volume group. So if we just go VG extend, and then we need that volume group name. So do we remember it? Because I there we go. Tab completion does work on this, so that's awesome. So there's our volume group, and we're going to extend it with dev sdb1. All right, so now the volume group has been extended. So we're going to just do a display of our volume group and see what we can make out. Now, by looking at this, you can see that it is an LVM2 format and max LVs 0, current LV 3. This is logical volumes is what it's saying. And max PV, current PVs 2, so there's 2 physical volumes. It says the size is 464 gigs. So right now it's allocated 231, and there's 232 gigs free that we can donate to this, that we can actually allocate to another logical volume. So now that we've made the physical disk, we've added it to the volume group, we can now allocate this to a specific local volume. So let's look at our groups again. We have our new hard drive, which is SDB. We went ahead and created a ext4 partition to make it SDB1, and then we created the physical volume with the pv create -dev SDB1, and then we just did VG extend SDB1, and now we need to add it to one of these logical volumes. So let's see what logical volumes we have, and we'll continue to the third and final layer, so we can get all this finished. So first off, we'll do an LV scan. Now, the LV scan just says what logical volumes are on this PC. Currently, there's 3 logical volumes. There's a root one, which has 70 gigs. There's a home directory, which has 153 gigs. And then there's a swap partition that has 8 gigs, or swap logical volume that has that. So those are all the logical volumes. We want to extend our home directory because that's where we'll put games and other things, and extend it by 232 gigs, which we have now free in our volume group. Now we could take and divvy this up and extend extra ones, or we could create entire new ones if we wanted. But really, we just want to take this disk and add it to our home directory so it can extend the actual free space of these logical volumes. And you can also see this with the df-h command. You'll see that currently our home is taking up 151 size. It currently is used 29 gigs, and it has 114 gigs available. Likewise, our root is almost 70 gigs. It's used 9 gigs, and it has 56 gigs free. So that's currently what we're working with, and we just toss this in. I think we'll add it to our home directory and extend this out. So here's all our local volumes, logical volumes that we can extend. So the logical volume, we could create a brand new one with the LV create command, but we don't want to do that. We want to extend our home directory. We can do LV change and LD reduce. These do some other stuff. Typically they're not used just because it changes a local volume, and it's easier just to destroy a local volume by moving the data elsewhere and then creating a brand new one and bringing it back. But there are some cool features, like if you wanted to reduce the amount of space in, let's say, the root, and take away like 40 gigs and leave just 20 gigs, and take that 40 gigs and put it over into the home directory, you could totally do that as well. So the reduce command is definitely worthwhile. LV rename in case you want to rename them. LV remove to remove, obviously. We already did a scan. Display gives more details. We want this command right here, LV extend -L plus 100% free. Now we can do -L 10 gig and only just like deviate out by that, but really we would just want to say, hey, extend this logical volume as much free space as this volume group has. So this is actually the volume group here. So let's go ahead and extend this this logical volume out. We'll paste this right into here, and then we need to select our actual logical volume. So to do this, we'll do a df-h, and we'll grab the logical volume. So we'll go ahead, come over here, and we want to make sure it goes to this home. So we'll highlight it, and we'll paste it right in there. So this should take all the free space available from the volume group and put it in this volume. So you'll see the size of the logical volume has changed from 153 to 386. And then let's go df-h, and you'll see it hasn't changed yet because we need to resize the file system now. This is the reason why I really like ext4, because we can do this on the fly. So we can just simply do a resize to fs dev, and we can actually just go ahead and highlight this again and put that right in there. So this will resize it to its file system, which should happen pretty quick. Look at that, just a couple seconds, really, not even a second. So now let's do a df-h, and you'll see our home directory has been expanded by the entire size of that drive, and we have officially combined the drive. So very, very powerful. Now I wanted to go ahead and explain, I did an LV extend, and I tried to go ahead and do a lot of this just like I did down there. But when I did the tab completion after the -L plus 100% free, it kept giving me actual physical volumes and other things, and we didn't want that. So the tab completion did not work for this. That's why I like to do the df-h and then copy paste the actual logical volume. So that is typically, in a nutshell, how we did it. So we came through here, just as a brief overview. We have a brand new hard drive. We made an ext4 partition under SDB1. We then made the physical volume. We added that physical volume to this volume group. And then we already had a home directory set up as a logical volume. We did LV extend, added it to it, and then we simply resized our file system to all that new space we have. So there we have it in its entirety. Now there's a lot of other commands in here. Highly recommend this. If there's a specific command that I missed or you want to check out more of, remember to do, like, let's say pv create, and then just do --help, and it gives you a lot of examples and other things in here. Or you can always do the manual as well. So you can do manual or man pv create. And this kind of gives you more of a description, exactly what it is, some examples, and you can kind of fly through this. So I wanted to just make sure you know about the --help and the manual. Manual is a little more extensive because it goes and gives you everything. It gives you specific examples, which is really nice, and it kind of shows you how to make all these things. So I absolutely love this, but very, very intuitive, and after you understand how it's structured, it really makes a heck of a lot of sense. But man, at the very beginning, it can be a little daunting figuring it out. So hopefully this helps you. So there we go. That is LVM. I absolutely love LVM. I think it's really cool. However, a big shout out to Paul, one of my patrons. Without your message, I really would have never delved into LVM that much because I don't see it much in business. And one downside to LVM is if you have two partition or two drives like this on one partition, if one of these drives go bad, it can really mess things up. So it does make you less reliable adding more drives into one partition because you'll have multiple points of failure instead of just the single. So Please note that. That's why you don't see it too much in business in this application. But with all that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, thank you to all my patrons, especially you, Paul, for mentioning this to me. And I'll see you in the next one.